in the heart of a bustling African city, where ancient traditions blend with modern rhythms. 4 friends had gathered for an afternoon that would forever change their lives. There was Sefeko, the artist who spent her days painting murals of the city's forgotten stories. Bayo, the tech genius who seemed more comfortable among machines than people. Olumo, the eternal optimist with a fascination for history. And Zola, the quiet one who rarely spoke but observed everything. On that day, their shared curiosity led them down an unfamiliar path. They had heard rumors about an abandoned shrine hidden within the outskirts of the city, far beyond the towering buildings and crowded streets. No one had visited it in decades, but they were drawn to the mystery of it. As they walked through narrow alleys and overgrown paths, the noise of the city faded, replaced by the whispers of ancient trees and the distant hum of the wind. The shrine, when they found it, was not what they had expected. It was small, half buried under the weight of nature's reclaiming hands, with vines creeping over crumbling stone. The carvings on the walls were faded, barely visible, as though the shrine itself had been forgotten by time. "This place feels different," Sefeko murmured, brushing her fingers against one of the carvings. "It feels like it's waiting," Olumo added, his voice softer than usual. Without thinking, they all stepped forward, as though pulled by an invisible force. In the center of the shrine was a worn altar. Bayo, ever the explorer, noticed a small, hollowed-out stone cup atop it. "Maybe it's an offering bowl," Zola suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. Olumo knelt down beside the altar and, in a rare moment of impulsiveness, picked up a nearby pebble and placed it in the bowl. "What are you doing?" Sefeko laughed lightly, but there was tension in her voice. "Who knows? Maybe it'll do something." Olumo shrugged, though his smile was more nervous than carefree. What happened next took them all by surprise. The air around them thickened, as if the very atmosphere had awakened. A faint light glowed from the bowl, growing brighter with every second until it burst into a golden flame. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and before any of them could react, a figure emerged from the flame. It was not fire, yet it shimmered as though made of pure light. A man, or something like a man, stood before them. His presence was overwhelming, filling the small space with an energy that made the air vibrate. His skin seemed to glow, his eyes burning like embers from a long-dead fire. Draped in flowing robes that shifted colors with every breath, the figure stood tall and proud. "I am Jianga," he said, his voice deep, echoing as if it had traveled from the beginning of time. "You have summoned me." The 4 friends stared, speechless. A god stood before them, though he did not seem as powerful as the stories of old had described. There was something diminished about him, a flicker of weakness that clung to his form. You're real?" Zola finally managed to ask. Nyanga smiled, though it was a sad, tired smile. "I was once much more than real. I ruled over harmony, over nature's balance. But now I am forgotten. As are the others." Bayo, ever practical, stepped forward. "What do you mean, forgotten? You're standing right here." Nyanga's eyes met his, and the weariness deepened. "I am here because you called me, but I am no longer the god I once was. The world has changed. My power has faded because your kind no longer believes in us. The gods who once shaped your lands, your lives, they are no more than stories now, and stories cannot survive without belief." There was silence as the weight of his words settled over them. Sefeko, always one to sense the undercurrents of emotion, spoke softly. "So why are you here now? What happens next?" Nyanga stepped closer, his presence looming yet fragile. "You have summoned me at a time of great danger. There are forces moving, powers beyond your understanding. My rival, Wishi, the god of chaos, feeds on the very chaos that now rules your world. Every war, every act of greed." Olumo shook his head in disbelief. "So, what do we do? How are we supposed to stop a god?" Nyanga studied them for a moment before answering. "You must help me and the others like me regain our strength. There are gods hidden among your people, living ordinary lives because they too have lost their power. You must find them, Only together can we form a new pantheon strong enough to stand against Eshi. Sefeko looked around at her friends, searching their faces for a sign of what they were thinking. We're supposed to find gods living among us. How do we even begin? The gods are still tied to the elements they once ruled, Nyanga explained. The goddess of the hunt will be near the wild, perhaps working to protect nature in some way. The god of wisdom may be in a place of learning and so on. But they will not remember who they once were. You must help them remember. And then what? Zola asked, her voice edged with skepticism. We just tell them, hey, you're a god. Let's go fight chaos, and hope they believe us? Nyanga's gaze turned serious. It will not be easy. Many of them will resist. Some may not want to return to their old ways, but you must convince them, for the fate of this world depends on it. Bio let out a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. This is insane. We're just regular people. How are we supposed to do this? Nyanga's eyes softened. You are not just ordinary. You have something that most do not. You believe in possibilities, and that is where all change begins. The friends exchanged looks, each grappling with the enormity of what had just been laid before them. Sefeko was the first to step forward. If this is real, if there's even a chance we can make a difference, then I'm in. Olumo nodded beside her. Me too. I've always wanted to know more about the old gods, but now, I guess we'll get to see it firsthand. Bio sighed but gave a reluctant nod. All right, I'm not sure how much help I'll be, but I'm not letting you guys go through this alone. All eyes turned to Zola. She hesitated, then shrugged. If I say no, you're all going to drag me along anyway. Might as well get it over with. Nyanga smiled, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Thank you. With that, the god raised his hands, and the golden light surrounding him dimmed slightly. I will remain with you, guiding you when I can. But time is running short. Eshi grows stronger every day. You must begin your journey. They left the shrine, the weight of their new reality hanging over them. Each step they took back toward the city felt heavier, as though they were walking into a world they no longer fully understood. As the city's skyline came into view, the streets below seemed to pulse with a strange energy. An energy that now, thanks to Njianga's words, felt dangerous and alive with potential destruction. Later that night, as the friends sat together, they tried to make sense of their next move. They would need to find these hidden gods, convince them of their true identities, and somehow form a united front against Eshi. But where would they begin? How would they convince gods who had forgotten their power to stand up and fight once more? And just how far had Eshi's influence spread? As they pondered these questions, none of them noticed the dark figure watching from the shadows, eyes gleaming with a malevolent glow. Eshi had been listening, and he was already preparing for their arrival. The following days felt like they were pulled from a dream. The four friends, Sefeko, Bayo, Olumo and Zola, found themselves unable to shake the weight of Nyanga's words. The idea that gods walked among them, hidden in plain sight, haunted their every thought. Each time they passed a stranger on the street, every ordinary face now seemed like it could be masking something far more extraordinary. Yet, the reality of their mission made it clear. They couldn't waste time wondering who might be a god. They needed to act. Back at Olumo's small apartment, the friends gathered to discuss their first move. The apartment was cluttered, filled with books and trinkets from his fascination with African history and mythology. Sefeko sat cross-legged on the floor, her sketchpad in front of her, doodling aimlessly as she thought. Bio, always the restless one, paced back and forth in the limited space. Sola leaned against the window, staring out at the busy streets below. Olumo sat at his desk, scrolling through articles on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. We need a plan, Sefeko said, breaking the silence. Nyanga said we're supposed to find these gods, but he didn't exactly leave us a map. Olumo glanced up from his screen. I've been thinking about that. Nyanga mentioned that the gods are tied to the elements they once ruled, right? So, we should start by figuring out which gods are most likely to be here. I've been researching local legends, trying to connect them to different regions of the city. You mean we're going to have to go on a scavenger hunt across the whole city? Bio sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. There's got to be a better way. Well, we can't exactly put up posters saying, "Are you a forgotten god?" Sola muttered from her corner. Think about it, Olumo continued, ignoring Bayo's complaint. The goddess of the hunt, for example. She might be connected to wildlife or nature. If she's adapted to modern life, maybe she works in conservation or something similar. It's not much to go on, but it's a start. Sefeko tapped her pencil against her sketchpad. That makes sense. And Nyanga also mentioned the god of wisdom. He could be tied to a place of learning. A university professor, maybe? Exactly, Olumo said, nodding. We just need to figure out where these gods might fit into today's world. It won't be easy, but if we can narrow down where they could be, we might have a chance of finding them. Sola pushed away from the window, walking over to join the group. And when we do find them, what then? How do we convince them that they're gods? I'm pretty sure if someone came up to me claiming I was a forgotten deity, I'd think they were insane. Nyanga said they wouldn't remember who they were, Sefeko reminded her. But there's got to be something inside them, some part of them that remembers, even if it's buried. Bayo, still pacing, stopped in front of the group. So, we find them, trigger some sort of memory, and then they're supposed to just help us fight Eshi? It sounds too easy. It won't be easy, Olumo said, closing his laptop. But it's the only chance we've got. If we don't stop Eshi, he'll bring chaos to the entire city. You saw the way Nyanga looked. He's scared. That means we should be scared too. Bayo sighed and sat down on the couch. I just wish we had more to go on. It feels like we're walking blind. We'll figure it out as we go, Sefeko said, offering a small smile. We always do. The room fell silent again, each of them lost in their own thoughts. They knew this wasn't going to be a simple task, but the enormity of what lay ahead hadn't fully hit them until now. How did ordinary people like them take on a god of chaos? Finally, Zola broke the silence. Let's start with the goddess of the hunt. There's a wildlife reserve just outside the city. Maybe we should check there first. Olumo perked up. Good idea. It's not far, and if she's connected to nature, that would be the perfect place for her to hide. Bayo glanced at his watch. It's already getting late. We'll head there first thing tomorrow. With that decision made, they all parted ways for the night, each retreating to their own homes. But sleep didn't come easily for any of them. Their minds raced with possibilities. What they would find, how they would approach the gods, and what Eshi might be planning in the shadows. The next morning, the four friends met at the edge of the city, where the urban landscape gave way to sprawling greenery. The wildlife reserve stood before them, a large expanse of protected land, dense with trees and undergrowth. It was a peaceful place, far removed from the chaos of the city, but there was a wild energy here that felt alive, as though the land itself was holding its breath. This is the place, Zola said, her eyes scanning the landscape. If the goddess of the hunt is here, we'll find her. They approached the main entrance to the reserve, where a small signboard listed the names of the staff members. One name in particular caught Sifako's eye. Afi, head of conservation, she read aloud. That could be her. Olumo nodded in agreement. Let's start there. They entered the reserve, making their way through the narrow trails that wound through the forested area. Birds chirped overhead, and the scent of damp earth filled the air. It felt like stepping into a different world, one untouched by the passage of time. As they walked, Sefeko couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though she couldn't say by whom or what. After a few minutes, they reached a small clearing where a woman stood, her back to them, examining a patch of soil. She was tall, with dark braided hair pulled into a loose bun. Her skin glowed with a warmth that seemed to reflect the sun's rays, and there was an undeniable strength in the way she moved, like someone who had lived their life in tune with the land. That must be her, Zola whispered. They approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. When they were close enough, Sefeko called out, "Excuse me, are you Ife?" The woman turned, her eyes sharp and intelligent, though there was a calmness about her that immediately put them at ease. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" Sefeko exchanged a quick glance with the others before stepping forward. "We were hoping to ask you a few questions. It's kind of hard to explain, but we think you might be connected to something important. Aif raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting between them. Connected to what, exactly? Olumo cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. We think you might be someone else. Someone ancient. We think you might be a goddess. The goddess of the hunt, to be specific. For a moment, Aif simply stared at them, her expression unreadable. Then, to their surprise, she let out a soft laugh. A goddess, you say? I'm afraid you've got the wrong person. I'm just a conservationist. We know it sounds crazy, Sefakor said quickly. But hear us out. There's a god Nyanga, who told us that the old gods are still here, but they've forgotten who they are. He sent us to find you because we believe you're one of them. You just don't remember. Aif's smile faded slightly, her eyes narrowing. And why would I believe such a story? Zola stepped forward, her voice steady. Because deep down, you already know it's true. You feel it, don't you? That connection to the land, the animals. It's more than just a job to you. It's a part of who you are. You can feel the wildness inside you, the call of the hunt. For a moment, Aif didn't respond. She looked down at the ground, her expression thoughtful, as though she was trying to remember something long forgotten. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time. I've always felt different, like there's something more I should be doing. But I've never known what. Olumo took a step closer. That's because you're not just a conservationist. You're a protector of the wild, a force of nature. You were once the goddess who ruled over the hunt, who kept the balance between man and beast, but you've been hidden, just like the other gods. And now, Bio added, we need you to help us stop a god of chaos who's trying to destroy everything. Aif's eyes flickered with something, a recognition perhaps, or a memory surfacing from deep within. She took a slow breath, her posture straightening as though a weight had been lifted from her. A god of chaos, you say? His name is Eshi, Olumo said. He's feeding off the chaos in the world. War, corruption, greed. If we don't stop him, it'll get worse. Much worse. Aif's gaze hardened. And for the first time, they saw a spark of the goddess she once was. I may not remember everything, but if what you say is true, then I have no choice but to help you. Sefakor smiled, relief flooding through her. Thank you. We can't do this without you. Just as they were about to discuss their next move, the air around them shifted. A sudden chill descended upon the clearing, and the light that had filtered through the trees seemed to dim. The birds stopped singing, and an eerie silence fell over the reserve. Before any of them could react, a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadow. His presence was suffocating, the darkness around him seething like a living thing. His eyes gleamed with malice, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. Going somewhere? The figure asked, his voice dripping with venom. It was Esh. Fine. The battle was only beginning, and the friends knew they were far from ready. Winter New Pantheon, Part 3. The figure stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. Eshi, the god of chaos, had arrived. A chill ran through the group as they faced him. His presence was suffocating, the air itself seeming to bend around him, heavy with the weight of malevolence. Though the friends had known they would eventually face him, they weren't prepared for the reality of his power, the way it twisted the very space around them. Aif, the goddess of the hunt, narrowed her eyes, instinctively stepping in front of the others, as though shielding them from Eshi's gaze. She had been uncertain moments before, unsure of her past, but something deep inside her had reawakened. The hunter in her stirred, sensing the presence of a predator. Eshi's voice slithered through the air, cold and mocking. You've done well to find her, but it won't matter. The old gods are weak, mere shadows of what they once were. You are nothing compared to what I've become. Sefakor stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. We won't let you destroy this world. We're stronger than you think. Eshi let out a low, dark laugh. Stronger? You can barely grasp what you're up against. I feed on the very chaos that surrounds you, on your fear, your doubt, your violence. Every moment of discord in your world strengthens me, and the more you resist, the more powerful I become. As he spoke, the darkness around him seemed to grow, pulsating with energy. The trees nearest to him withered and twisted, their bark cracking under the weight of the chaos that radiated from him. The sky overhead darkened, clouds gathering as if in response to his presence. Ife's hand twitched, her eyes locking onto Eshi with a hunter's focus. "You underestimate us," she said, her voice low and steady. "You always did." Without warning, she lunged forward, faster than the eye could follow. In the blink of an eye, she had drawn a sleek, bone-carved dagger from her side and hurled it at Eshi with deadly precision. But just as the blade reached him, it stopped, suspended in the air as if caught by an invisible hand. Eshi's smile widened as he flicked his wrist, sending the dagger spiraling off into the trees. "You'll have to do better than that, Huntress." Bayo, Olumo, and Zola stood frozen, unsure of what to do. They were just ordinary people caught in a battle of gods, and the sheer power emanating from Eshi was overwhelming. But Sefeko, always the first to act in moments of crisis, pulled out her phone and frantically began searching for something. "What are you doing?" Zola whispered urgently. "I'm looking for a way to disrupt him. If chaos feeds him, maybe there's something we can do to shift the balance, something that restores order." "That's insane," Bayo muttered, but he moved closer to her, hoping she was onto something. Meanwhile, Ife circled Eshi, her movements graceful but tense, like a predator sizing up its prey. "You think you're invincible," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "But you've forgotten one thing. Chaos only thrives when there is no balance, and balance can always be restored." Eshi sneered. "There is no balance anymore. Look at the world around you. War, greed, destruction. Humans don't care for balance. They are creatures of chaos, and I am their god now." But Ife didn't back down. "Perhaps they've lost their way," she said. "But we haven't." In one fluid motion, she dropped to the ground, pressing her hands to the earth. The air crackled with energy as the ground beneath them trembled. The trees around the clearing, once withered by Eshi's presence, began to glow faintly with life. Their branches stretched toward the sky, and the leaves shimmered with a soft green light. Sefeko's eyes widened as she saw what Ife was doing. "She's drawing from the land," she whispered to the others. "She's using the balance of nature to fight back." Eshi's smile faltered, his gaze shifting to the trees. The power of the wild was beginning to push back against the chaos, disrupting the darkness that surrounded him. He snarled, his eyes flashing with rage. "You think this will be enough to stop me?" With a roar, he raised his hand, and a wave of dark energy shot toward Ife. But just as it was about to reach her, a figure stepped in front of her, raising his arms to shield her from the attack. It was Nyanga. The god of harmony, though weakened, had arrived in time. His presence seemed to calm the air, the chaos swirling around Eshi beginning to falter. Nyanga's hands glowed with a soft golden light, and as the dark energy struck him, it dissolved into nothing. "You will not win, Eshi," Nyanga said, his voice filled with quiet authority. "The balance you seek to destroy is greater than any one of us." Eshi's eyes blazed with fury. "You're weak, Nyanga. You and the others, relics of a forgotten world. You cannot stand against me." But Nyanga didn't waver. He looked at the four friends, who had been watching in awe. "The gods are not the only ones who have power," he said. "You, Sefeko, Bayo, Olumo, Zola. You have more strength than you realize. You've already begun to restore the balance just by believing in what can be." Olumo stepped forward, his heart pounding. "But we're not gods. How can we help?" Nyanga smiled gently. "You don't have to be gods to make a difference. The world is shaped by the choices of ordinary people. Every act of kindness, every moment of hope, every decision to fight for what is right, these are the forces that restore balance. And that is something Eshi cannot control." Sefeko's eyes lit up with understanding. "That's it. We don't need to fight Eshi with power. We need to fight him with the opposite of chaos, with unity." She turned to her friends, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to spread this. We need to get people to believe in something better, in harmony, in peace. If we can get enough people to reject the chaos, it'll weaken him." "Bayo, who had been skeptical from the start, finally nodded. It's crazy, but at this point I'm willing to try anything. Together, the friends pulled out their phones and began spreading the message, through social media, through texts, through any means they could. They urged people to come together, to reject the anger and division that fed Eshi's power. Slowly but surely, the message began to spread. And as it did, something remarkable happened. The darkness around Eshi began to wane. The chaotic energy that had once filled the air started to thin, replaced by a growing sense of calm. People across the city, across the country, began to unite in small but meaningful ways. Acts of kindness, moments of connection. The very fabric of society, which had been fraying under the weight of chaos, began to mend. Eshi howled in rage, his power weakening as the balance shifted against him. "No!" he roared, his voice filled with fury. "You cannot stop me. Chaos will always return." But Nyanga stood firm, his golden light shining brighter with each passing moment. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "but as long as there is balance, there will always be those who fight for harmony." With a final burst of energy, Nyanga raised his arms, and the light of the earth surged through him, striking Eshi with a force that sent him reeling. The god of chaos staggered, his form flickering as if he were on the verge of unraveling. His eyes blazed with hatred as he glared at the friends, at Nyanga, at the world that was rejecting him. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I will return. Chaos always returns." And with that, he disappeared, his form dissolving into the air like smoke in the wind. For a long moment, there was silence. The air was still, the darkness gone. The friends stood in the clearing, their hearts pounding, hardly believing what had just happened. Ifa, still glowing with the energy of the land, stepped forward and placed a hand on Nyanga's shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. Nyanga shook his head. "No, we all did it. The balance has been restored for now. But Eshi was right about one thing. Chaos will always return, and when it does, we must be ready." The friends exchanged glances, the weight of his words sinking in. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. "I guess this means we're not done yet," Olamo said, his voice tinged with both exhaustion and determination. Sefako smiled, though there was a hint of weariness in her eyes. "No, but at least now we know what we're fighting for." As the sun began to set over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape, the four friends stood side by side, knowing that their journey was just beginning. But for the first time, they also knew they weren't alone. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, let us know your views in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one.